Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. So I'm obviously Bryan Walker. I work at IDEO, Global Design and Innovation Consultancy, whose real sort of purpose is to have disproportionate impact through design. Now, we were founded about 25 years ago, and originally what we largely worked on was products. So we worked on the first laptop. We also worked on the first commercial mouse with Apple. However, over these 25 years, we've evolved. We've largely evolved through our clients, pulling us into more complex or ambitious challenges. Clients like, for example, the Ritz-Carlton or Eileen Fisher, who really sort of began to ask us to design holistic customer experiences. So what this means is not just designing the service and product, but designing all of the key touch points for the consumer, like brand and communication, environments, and doing so with the intention of them creatively coming together at key moments in order to bring to life a unique experience. Over time, too, we're also asked by clients like Kaiser Permanente or Life Technologies, which I think is just down the road from here, to design organizations. Rethink how they organize themselves and also how they work together in order to better serve their customer and be able to innovate repeatedly. And also, we've been asked by clients like Bedsider, a nonprofit that I think many of you are familiar with or are going to become more familiar with by the end of today, or foundations like the Kauffman Foundation to help them tackle complex, systemic social change challenges. Challenges like how do you reduce unplanned pregnancies, or how is it that you revitalize an impoverished community? So over these 25 years, with each stage of kind of our evolution, we help kind of build the experiences and the expertise to move to that next stage. Of course, with each time realizing the more and more ambitious goals you take on, the more we really have to leverage all of our means to be able to kind of accomplish the outcomes we wanted. So that's a little bit about IDEO and kind of where I come from. However, I hear where all of you come from is a real passion for producing better public health outcomes. Obviously a pretty honorable pursuit, but also a pretty complicated one. I think you all know that by now. For one thing, if you're really talking about producing better public health outcomes, at the end of the day, it comes down to individual behavior change. It's about an individual doing something and not doing another thing. Now, what's really tricky about individual behavior change is free will. At the end of the day, that individual decides what they do or what they don't do. So you can't necessarily directly design for a behavior. However, you can design for behaviors. In other words, designing the conditions around the individual that are most apt to nudge a particular behavior. We all know, though, too, that that's not a simple thing. It's not as simple as just educating people on what's in their best self-interest. Because all of us, and I mean all of us, have probably done plenty of things that haven't been exactly in our own best self-interest. However, I do think that there's still those opportunities where we can help begin to use design to drive individual behavior change. Now, if that wasn't challenging enough for what you're all trying to do, which is improve kind of public health outcomes, in parallel, I know all of you are having to grapple with systemic challenges. So not only are you having to grapple with individual behavior change challenges, you're also having to grapple with systemic challenges, which really means that you're having to accommodate many stakeholder voices and needs. You don't have the luxury of just focusing kind of on the end user. And also, with many of you, the systems in which you are designing and playing are incredibly complex, with tons of interdependencies, which produces unpredictability. You push on one lever or intervention, and it often has unforeseen ripple effects across the entire system. And lastly, of course, you're having to operate within a world of tons of constraints, whether those be legislative, fiscal, political, moral, cultural, and time. So I say all of this to say that I find your pursuit of better public health outcomes very honorable, and I also empathize with the complexity of pulling it all off. So I would love to give all of you a silver bullet, a quick fix to everything, like the panacea for your world. But as you all know, that's pretty much impossible. When you're really talking about complex systemic, social change, you have to kind of commit to and embrace a journey. However, what I do think I can give you is something that might not be as great as a silver bullet, but I think is still going to be very helpful for you. I can give you basically a Swiss Army knife. So it's a tool that I think will be very helpful in solving all sorts of diversity of challenges that you inevitably have to grapple with as you go along your journey. And whether those are challenges about designing services that better fulfill the needs of the end users, or if it's about redesigning your organizations to better kind of engage your employees and unlock your full potential, or if it's really thinking creatively about scaling and your partnering models, I think this tool can help you begin to grapple with many diverse challenges like that. And that tool, of course, is design thinking. And so design thinking is the creative problem-solving approach that IDEO uses. I would definitely say that it is one of the key ingredients to the secret of our success over the years and decades. Now, this Venn diagram's probably the simplest visual to kind of explain what is design thinking at a high level. So, with any Venn diagram, you always want to be in the middle, and that's where innovation lies. So innovation are things, solutions that are desirable for the people that they're designed for, viable for the organization that's trying to deliver them, and feasible technically. Now, there's a lot of different ways in which you can try to approach getting to that middle space. But what's distinct about design thinking is we start by looking at the challenge through the lens of people in order to get inspired by the people we're designing for and blow out as many possibilities as we possibly can imagine. And then we employ the practices of prototyping in order to begin to iterate our way towards that center, evolving the most promising concepts until we think we have an idea that's viable, desirable, and feasible. Now, I want to dig a little deeper into 3 specific key tenets of design thinking, just to give you a little bit of a better understanding of this creative problem-solving approach. So the first one, observe and empathize with people to gain a fresh perspective. Now, this is a saying that we have. People don't always do what they say they do. People don't always do what we think they do. People don't always do what they think they do. Now, this is one of the reasons when we start projects, we very rarely send out a survey. And that's because at that point, a lot of the times, we don't even know what's the right questions to be asking. And also, we find that a lot of times people have limitations in articulating exactly their needs. So instead, what we do is we borrow ethnographic research methods pioneered by anthropologists. And one of the first things we do is get out into the field to better see what's really going on. Now, we use a variety of different ethnographic methods. However, they're all really about observation and empathy, trying to observe what people say in open conversations and do in context in order to let us as designers get to a place of empathy where we really can put ourselves in the shoes of the people we're trying to understand so we can feel what they're feeling and think what they're thinking. And the reason why we try to get to the space of empathy is because we find that's the space that you have the best shot of getting at latent needs, those needs that aren't so easy to articulate. Now, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So this is a quote by Henry Ford. I've also been told that maybe Henry Ford didn't say it, but I want him to have said it. But I think he makes a really good point here. He talks about the limitations of just asking people what they want. Instead, for sort of the game-changing, bigger ideas, often you have to cut through what people first say and try to get to that latent need that you can build off of. So let me give you an example. So this is a question that we were asked from the San Francisco Department of Emergency Management. How might we help more people prepare for earthquakes? When we started sitting down with people and having conversations about emergency preparedness, a lot of the conversation felt like we were talking about Armageddon. And then when we looked at the department's messaging out in the world, it kind of echoed that sentiment. There was a lot of fear-based messaging. It was a lot of stockpiling of goods. However, when you dig a little deeper and spend time with people and get them to start reflecting on kind of their past experiences with earthquakes or natural disasters, a lot of people actually talked about very different things. They started talking about putting aside differences with people and coming together with neighbors, friends, families. So the conversation began to be a lot less Armageddon and a lot more campfire. So this led to SF72. It's a digital hub for emergency preparedness to help San Francisco's get prepared by putting as much emphasis on social connection as it does on stockpiling of goods. Because the big insight that we started to see was that emergency preparedness was really as much about social connection as it was about having 72 hours of goods. So on this site, you'll find all sorts of innovative tools that really sort of look at leveraging social media to help people be better connected in pursuit of preparedness. And this is starting to get rolled out to more cities than San Francisco. So the second key tenet I want to share with you is to look broad to find inspiration in unlikely places. If you look to the usual suspects, you get the usual answers. So often with projects, at the very beginning, we actually spend less time with that 50 percentile average user. Instead, we go to the extremes of the bell curves, the 1 percentiles and the 99 percentiles. And we look at those extreme users, and the rationale is pretty simple, because we actually find that on those edges, you often have a better shot of spotting those latent needs that are felt throughout the whole population. So I'll give you another example. This is with the water and sanitation for Urban Poor and Unilever. They, as a collaboration, they came to us asking, how might we reduce open defecation in low-income communities within the developing world? So the goal was an affordable sanitation system. And the pilot space was Kumasi, Ghana's second largest city, which is 2 million people. Now the challenge in Kumasi is there's no sewer. Instead, most people use public toilets, which they have to pay for, but are also very poorly maintained. So it results in inadequate sanitation systems, so a lot of people just resort to defecating in the streets, which is horrible for the environment, but also spreads a lot of disease. So in the end, though, we created an affordable portable toilet that could be put in people's homes, and we created the Clean Team. So the Clean Team is a franchisee that rents these branded toilets and then installs them in your home and services them 2 to 3 times a week. So kind of following that first tenet, the first thing we did in this project is we went out into Kumasi and spent time with the residents, better understanding what are their sanitation needs. And we heard a lot of stuff about security, some horrible stories in terms of muggings and rapes that would happen at night when people were trying to make their way to the public toilets. But we also heard about sanitation issues, and we experienced them firsthand. But one of the running jokes in Kumasi was that the public toilets are so smelly that you can hear them. Now, the interesting thing is, even amongst all of that, with the security issues and the sanitation issues, when we would bring up and share these early prototypes of this idea of a cheap portable toilet that you could bring and put in your own home and you'd have to pay for, a lot of people balked at the idea of spending money on this type of utility. However, our big breakthrough came when we actually started looking to the extremes, when we looked to the affluent and the emerging affluent in Kumasi, which wasn't really the right target market. However, what we did see is they all had cell phones, and they all loved to flaunt the fact that they had cell phones because it was really a social status symbol. So it got us thinking, could we design these toilets to be a social status symbol? Kind of moving from being a purchase of convenience or safety to actually being an aspirational purchase. But in order to do that, we had to heavily brand the service team and the service trucks, because this toilet sits inside of your house where it's hidden away. But you want all the neighbors to know that you've got it. So every 2 to 3 weeks, there's a whole spectacle in front of your house when they're changing out the toilets. And so now, it's been a little while, we've got 3,800 of these toilets installed in people's homes, and they're being serviced regularly. Now I'm going to share with you the last key tenet of design thinking, and that's this idea of build to think to fail forward quickly. Now it's very natural when you have an idea to want to hold it close to your chest and think it through before you start building something. However, this principle is encouraging the exact opposite. As soon as you have an idea, start building it in order to think through it. So this means for a lot of our projects, we start with very rough prototypes. So this is an example of what I mean by a rough prototype. This was a project where we were designing a surgical instrument, actually for nasal surgery, which is a little disgusting. But nevertheless, we found out that in the first meeting with surgeons that one of the big challenges with this instrument was dexterity. So all we had to do was, in that meeting, grab a marker, grab some Scotch tape, grab a canister, grab a clip, and that's all you needed for a quick prototype to get something in the hands of surgeons to actually start learning much quicker about challenges of dexterity in terms of gripping angles and weight displacement. Now, I know what many of you are thinking is that I can get the concept of prototyping when we're talking about physical products. But many of the things you work on are more complex or more intangible. Well, my argument is that you can prototype anything, whether that's social interactions, whether that's organizational models, service gestures, digital interactions, spaces. You can prototype anything, because all a prototype is taking a quick physical manifestation of your idea and putting a form where it's easier for you to play with and get more people to interact with. So there's a lot of values to prototyping. One, in quickly prototyping, you often surface unforeseen challenges and opportunities. Here's the backstory on one of Nerf's best-selling products. We were actually trying to design a freestanding football for kicking field goals. Instead, we failed with that, but we found out that you put wings on a football and you throw a perfect spiral, which became a hit product. Another value to prototyping is that you give your teams something to work with and align around. When you come together to collaborate and you're collaborating just through words, often what I'm saying isn't quite what you're hearing. And you multiply that by a mess of people, and quickly you got people talking through each other, around each other, over each other. Instead, you take a rough prototype and you put it in the middle of that table, and quickly you're going to get everybody on the same page, interacting with the exact same information. And lastly, prototyping is about risk mitigation. A lot of times it gives you the opportunity to really learn what works and what doesn't work in a safer environment. So I'm pretty sure Starbucks never prototyped this one. I'm actually a big customer of Starbucks, and I'm really glad they weren't sponsoring this event, but this image is just too golden not to share. So that's design thinking, a creative problem-solving approach that can be applied to a diversity of challenges. Now, I wanted to take my time on stage to actually spend more of it talking to you about our approach than necessarily all the products and services and things that we put out in the world. The reason is simple, is because although we're incredibly proud of many of the things that we've been a part of getting out in the world that I would say touch many of your lives, we do realize that perhaps our greatest impact will be through the transformation of individuals and organizations, not actually the products we designed. Because all of us are creative. Some of us might have forgotten that, but all of us, when we were born as humans, we were born with a creative capacity. And unfortunately, too many of our schools and our workplaces try to convince us otherwise. They try to squelch that creativity out of us. But I know that all of them will fail because creativity is like a muscle. It can atrophy for sure, but it doesn't go away. So all you have to do is start using it again, and it will grow stronger and stronger. So I honor kind of the big journey all of you are on. I want to give you a very simple Swiss Army knife in the form of design thinking. I think it'll be really helpful for you in solving all sorts of the diverse creative challenges you'll encounter, but also in doing so, in using it, you will grow your team's and yours creative capacity. And I really want that because given our world's kind of complexity and growing challenges, we definitely need more creative capacity. So thank you.